Hello and welcome to another quick blog summary of this month's blog. This month's blog is all about returning to work after cancer, and it's some of the top questions that I get asked in session. I think to start, the theme that often comes up is that I really want patients to experience preparedness. I've had a few instances where patients have shared stories that they tried to return to work and it was just way too difficult, and they encountered a lot of barriers, and that kind of caused them to feel like a failure, and then they had to pull back and quit the return to work. And often, had that patient experience some supports leading up to and potentially even a gradual return to work, they would have experienced success. So I really want to spread the message that all patients should kind of be open to having a discussion around returning to work even before they start, even after treatment, when appointments have kind of slowed down, just starting to be a little bit open to having those discussions and putting our resources to use so that patients can start to experience preparedness. So by the time they do return to work, they've done some assessments, they've done some work simulation, they've done some physical conditioning, they've done some cognitive preparation. And so when they start a gradual return to work, they're feeling prepared. So as we know that there can be many symptoms with a cancer journey, and sometimes during the treatment phase, you're like a deer in headlights, just focusing so much on surviving, appointment after appointment, doing all the stuff, and then it's only when the treatments slow down and the appointments slow down that patients can kind of all of a sudden experience it all. So the symptoms rush in, and the limitations rush in, and the aftermath is kind of, coming to surface. And that's sometimes when all these symptoms are more limiting than we think. Sometimes for some patients, it's not that bad. And so this is where the journey is very personalized. But often these symptoms warrant some assessment, some cancer physio support, and sometimes these symptoms can actually be a diagnosable condition. And so through a diagnosis, you can receive a little bit more specific rehab planning and a plan that's personalized to you. So one of the main questions I always get asked is, when is it a good time to return to work? Well, once again, treatment is personalized, rehab is personalized, so return to work needs to be personalized as well. And this depends on, your reaction to treatment, your own symptom burden. This depends on any conditions that you may have, whether or not those have been diagnosed and treated, and the rehab that you've been undergoing prior. So, it's a very individual thing. Research just show that most patients do return to work after about a year and are successful doing so. However, once again, the return to work plan does need to be personalized. Often I get asked too, do I need to return to work full time? How do I know if I'm ready to return to work? We kind of touched on that with the previous question. With having an assessment done and connecting with a cancer physio is a really great way to understand a little bit of your physical and potential cognitive limitations that might affect your return to work. And then from there, we can create a bit of a plan, a rehab plan. A lot of patients do think they need to just return to work full time, but often that isn't the case. If you speak with your employer or your case manager through your extended medical, there's often the option of a gradual return to work. A gradual return to work plan, or a GRTW plan, can be very effective. If we think about any other kind of goal in life or habit that we're trying to build, let's say it's learning a new language or learning how to run, we do best with kind of slow, steady ramp up over time, allowing our nervous system to adapt and learn new skill. It's the same with work. Patients do find the most success when they have preparedness. They've been rehabbing and preparing leading up to the return to work, and then they undergo a gradual return when they do start. So here is my favorite little cartoon, Sam and Poncho. You can see here she's got a confident little smile, and so does her dog, because she underwent a GRTW plan and some preparedness before considering returning to work. So GRTW, just to go a little bit more into detail, it's just kind of this acronym for ramping up slowly. And you can ramp up slowly in a variety of ways. This is where the plan needs to be very personalized to your needs and your conditions. You can modify your work weeks, you can modify to shorter hours, and you can even modify your duties, triaging your responsibilities into different levels and categories so that you can start with those kind of smaller bites, if you will, and easier tasks, and slowly ramp up your responsibility over time. The services that we offer to support a return to work, well, we do return to work and capacity evaluations, kind of simulating your work demands and assessing your function relative to that. We do also offer kind of comprehensive initial assessments for patients that are new to the return to work phase, or even just new patients to cancer rehab. Of course, in these initial assessments, a lot of assessments occur. You can click on that link to learn more about those services. We look at your function, your balance, your range of motion, your strength, your aerobic capacity, your neurovascular systems, your sensation, and really understanding kind of what physical symptoms may be occurring and if these are diagnosable conditions. We also obviously liaise with your family doctor, your case managers at your extended medical provider, providing GRTW planning and supports. So once we've identified any limitations or diagnosable conditions that you might have, this is how we can really then create the right GRTW plan for you. And like I said, this plan can be the difference between feeling success and encouragement or feeling like your return to work was just really too difficult. So we love to set up patients for success with a sense of preparedness. So the medical reports that may be needed for your return to work are different with every employer and every extended medical provider as well. There's a link on my website here on the blog where you can see the medical reports that we provide and a list of all the cancer-related conditions that we treat. Sometimes patients, unfortunately, try a GRTW, try to return to work, and are just not successful doing so. Their physical and mental impairments are just too much. This is where having those cancer-related conditions diagnosed by a cancer physio can be very helpful in advocating for disability funding or a delayed return to work. So once again, this is where kind of coming in to see a cancer physio and having that comprehensive assessment can be a really powerful thing for supporting you to have good quality of life and the supports that you need. Medical forms that we do fill out, like I highlighted, is the CPP disability benefit and so on, which can help kind of initiate short or long-term disability funding while you are not working. Of course, the conversation, and mindset is that we should always be reevaluating and always thinking about kind of growing and planning a little bit for the future. So I like to meet patients that are on short or long-term disability on a frequent basis so that we can reassess in case something's changed and that possibility for return to work can be re-examined. So this table here just highlights a few conditions that sometimes patients haven't been diagnosed with, but they're experiencing the symptoms. So, the pain or tingling that's really unmanageable in the hands or feet that affects your ability to stand or walk or use your hands might actually be, chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuropathies. Imbalances or dizziness or lightheadedness could maybe be a vestibular neuropathy. As an example, if there's a lot of joint stiffness or pain or voice changes or difficulties with breathing, that could be radiation fibrosis syndrome. So it's good to kind of put a condition to the symptoms that can help a lot for funding and for GRTW planning as well. One of those last questions that I put here, but is very, very important, is how do patients know if they're emotionally and mentally prepared to go back to work? Well, of course, there's a plethora of kind of well-supported and free counseling services out there through the BC Cancer Agency as well as Inspire Health that I often refer patients to. But it's also good to kind of think about when you're actually thinking about returning to work, what that workplace setting might challenge you to do. What are the imposed demands that might come from that environment? So sometimes I'll have a little bit of time to, talk with patients while they're in session, providing some tips on managing your emotional health when returning to work. Of course, counseling is not within my scope of practice, but because I spend so much time with patients, of course, we end up kind of treading lightly on some of these topics. So just to kind of touch on this a little bit, of course, I do provide a lot more resources and professional supports, but patients do find that in order to kind of better manage their emotional health, it's good to kind of plan ahead when you want to manage the conversations. A lot of people, when you go back to work, are going to ask you about your cancer diagnosis as a means to show that they care. But sometimes you're just not in a headspace where you want to unpack that or talk about that all the time. So it's good to have kind of a quick statement you can kind of pull when you just want to gently kind of close that door. So it could be something like, thank you for asking, but I'm finding myself wanting to focus forward from here on out. Or I really appreciate your concern, but to best manage my energy today, I'd like to just focus on my tasks at hand. So these are just examples of kind of tools to better manage the conversations. Another big theme, of course, and tip with emotional health is to accept help. Not always easy, but in the workplace, if there is people that are taking on some of your duties as you undergo a gradual return, accept the support of your peers. The last one that I just touched on lightly here is just know your rights. Once again, I'm not a lawyer, but it is good for me to provide resources to patients on what you need to disclose and what you don't. And if you're undergoing a job interview or kind of returning to work, what do you need to share with your employer versus what do you have the right to withhold to yourself? And there's a link there to the Cancer Legal Resource Center that elaborates on that a lot more. At the end of the blog here, I've provided a lot of resources. The BC Cancer Agency has a great section on returning to work. There's some frameworks that are also provided to self-assess. So lots of resources out there to kind of kickstart your exploration of whether or not you feel ready to return to work. So once again, thank you so much for your interest in science and rehab, and I hope this has been helpful.